because they could take off your arm with like 3 strokes of a saw, because faster was better if you're not out. Yeah. So I would encourage folks to go check out. She actually has a really cool book too. That's called, I think it's called The Butchering Art, and it talks about like that kind of that growth of kind of medicine, which is kind of interesting. But I think what's crazy that most people that had this performed actually survived trepanation. Like they survived it. And there's some kind of nut jobs out there, and that's the only way I know how to put it. There's some nut jobs out there that voluntarily do this to themselves still today because they believe it does something with blood oxygen, something weird. But it still occurs quite a bit today, trepanation, and it occurs in regular medicine as well, as we kind of mentioned. There's just so many wacky things. This is one that I thought was really interesting, was the use of medicinal mercury, which nowadays you just kind of go like, what the fuck? Really? Mercury? But as with most things, it seems in the Victorian era, in this this general era, was like it was all in this gigantic battle against syphilis. I guess because syphilis was such a raging disease, and at the time there wasn't really any cure for it. You can go back and look at some of the pictures of like syphilis folks, like literally, like they would get like these massive holes like in their head. Their hair would fall out, their noses would fall off, like their ears would fall off, like they would literally be almost like what do you call it? What's that disease? Like leprosy. It was almost like leprosy. And that's where even like the powdered wig craze came from, right? Like people had no hair, so they ended up wearing these big powdered wigs to cover their hair that they had lost from their rampant syphilis. But yeah, I think it's pretty wild to see, like, so they use mercury, it sounds like, in this. So here's where it talks about these reddish brown sores that cover the body in a rash, sores in the mouth, anus, or vagina, swollen glands, headache, neurological problems, infections in membranes surrounding the brain, deafness, dementia, stroke, and much more. One famous case was Al Capone, who was weakened and delusional. And he was one of the first civilian recipients of penicillin. But unfortunately, the medicine came a little too late for him. But mercury is this, it's a metal, and it's something you definitely don't want to play with because it's neurotoxic and it's just horrible for you. So its immediate effects can cause all kinds of nastiness all up on your body. But in the 1920s, there was, they used it to treat syphilis. So they used to douse the person in mercury in an attempt to cure them, even knowing that the pain and death would often result. So there was mercury lotions, mercury creams, all kinds of stuff that you would use to try to cure yourself of syphilis, all of which would pretty much kill you. So the syphilis, I don't know. I don't know which one would be worse, to die of mercury poisoning or syphilis. I don't know which one would be more painful.
I don't know. I think mercury poisoning would be worse.
I don't know. That's just insane. But mercury is used in a ton of stuff. This one's really interesting too. The use of medicinal cannibalism. So I seen this a little bit the other day when I was doing some research. It was amazing to see this kind of mummy powder that was used. So mummies became very popular in the Victorian era, to where people wanted to have mummy parts. They wanted to, go on mummy expeditions, and they liked to fucking eat mummies because they believed that it was a cure-all as well. So you could literally buy bottles of medicine that was ground up mummy parts.
That's disgusting.
And you would consume it. And it would make you, I guess, not whatever. I don't know exactly.
That's so gross.
Most of the pictures that I saw of it actually said, like, mummy, it was like mummy powder cure-all, fixes everything that's wrong with you, kind of stuff. But so during the Renaissance, these specialists would grind up powders made from Egyptian mummies. And the worst part is they would steal most of these fucking mummies, right? So you think about like King Tut and like these amazing Egyptian artifacts. All these motherfuckers from this day and era were out there stealing mummy parts. So could you imagine the mummies that just got ground up and drank, right? These amazing finds that we never found. But so they would steal these Egyptian mummies, they would sell them, and they would grind them up. They would use them as all kinds of stuff. So here is a medical grade substitute. So mummy got so popular that they had to come up with a fucking generic mummy, right? So there was a generic mummy brand. So they would take the fresh, unspotted cadaver of a red-headed man, because in them the blood is thinner, they claim, hence more excellent. Oh. So you would take a cadaver of a red-headed man around the age of 24 who had been executed and died a violent death. You would let that corpse lie out for 1 day and night in the sun and moon. The weather has to be good. You don't want that motherfucker rained on, snowed on, sleeted on, all that stuff. You would cut the flesh in pieces, and you would sprinkle it with myrrh and just a touch of aloe, just a little. So the essential oil clan cult was into it back then too. So a little essential oil on top of the flesh of the cadaver. Then you would soak it in spirits of wine for several days. You would hang it up again for 6 to 10 hours, soak it again, once again in wine. Then you would let the pieces dry in a shady spot, and thus they would be similar to smoked meat, and they would not stink. And you could use that in lieu of your highly overpriced premium mummy. So this was your generic mummy. So, you go to the pharmacy to get your generic whatever. This was the generic replacement for redheads. Dead redheaded men were the replacement for mummy powder, I guess. That's back in the day. So when you read that, like, it was, they were taking executed people and taking their bodies and making that, using corpse medicine, I guess would be the best way to put it.
I wonder what happened to the people that actually took it.
I don't know. I don't think that you're going to necessarily probably. So here's what happened to them. Nothing, unfortunately. Like, they didn't get any better. They probably didn't get any worse. They probably just died of what.
And nothing happened.
They just died of whatever ailed them.
They did a lot of research.
Just. I don't know. I think it's just like we have this like really. Like pleasant view of the past. Like, we watch movies and we're like, oh, it would have been so great to live during the Civil War, or it would have been so great to live during the Renaissance. It would have been so great to live during the Victorian era. But literally in this time, you could have a fucking toothache and die. Like you could literally have an abscessed tooth and it would kill you. Mm-hmm. Like, when you read these medical stories, it's like, yep, John Doe got a blister on his leg, so he amputated his leg, and then he died of, post-operation, he died of massive infection. And it all started with a blister, like, on his leg. Like, so it would have probably kind of sort of really sucked to live back then. So I think these people were probably just more, like, desperate for anything that would work. It's like, well, I've got fucking syphilis, my hair's falling out, and my nose fell off. And, like, fuck, give me the mummy powder. Fuck, I can't afford the mummy powder. Give me the 24-year-old redhead. And soak it in wine and throw some essential oils on it. And
so good.
Then douse me in mercury and just please make my syphilis go away. Stuff that we think about nowadays that's, like, super, just kind of like, I mean, I guess if you get syphilis, it kind of sucks. But, like, you could just deal with it, I mean, you could at least just go take a pill and deal with it. You're not going to Egypt and trying to grind up mummies and drink them or pouring mercury all over yourself. Which leads us to tobacco smoke enemas.
That's so interesting.
I know, this sounds like something you'd be into. Oh, so I'm trying to, we're trying to convince him to quit smoking cigarettes, so everyone can write him hate mail and tell him that he needs to stop smoking cigarettes. So that's the jab for the tobacco smoke enema. But so the enema was used and widely popular, again, to pretty much cure everything. Like, okay, your arm hurts, let's blow some tobacco smoke up your butt. I think that will totally help. But it was used as a cure for a variety of ailments in the 17th and 18th centuries. They had these marvelous tobacco smoke enema kits where doctors could safely and gently blow tobacco smoke up the anus of a patient, up the rear of a patient. So this is what's fucked up to me. So initially it was used to try to revive drowning victims. So could you imagine like having that out of body experience? Like you just drowned and like you're floating to the heavens, right? And you're like looking down like this movie scene, right? And they're like, "Oh my God, what do we do? I don't know. Someone light a cigarette and blow it up their ass." Like when you think about it compared to today, like this poor person dies.
It's like
you could literally punch them in the face and do more than blowing smoke up their ass.
So I expect, like, at the beach, like, all the lifeguards would have, like, tobacco, smoke enema. Something happens, get the tobacco, smoke enema, put up their ass. Yuck.
But this is what's funny. So this is what's even funnier as this kind of goes on, is that it was the first step. If the tobacco smoke enema failed, they would do artificial respiration. So then they would do CPR. They would light the tobacco. They would use this thing that looks like one of those old school like things, you know, that you stoke a fire with. Uh-huh. They would stoke your ass full of tobacco smoke, and they're like, "Fuck, that doesn't work. Okay, now start CPR." Right?
They're just one step behind back then. So close.
So it was literally kind of the old school way. These were physicians, right? They would take a puff, insert a pipe, and blow. So they're going pipe in your butt, blowing smoke up your ass, and that I don't know. I don't have the notes on this, but I would assume that that's where the term "don't blow smoke up my ass" comes from. It has to come from that, right?
Makes sense.
I don't know that. I'm going to have to look now, but it has to. It seems like it would come from that. That's such a wild thing, though. When you,
I'm trying to wonder, like, what's the reasoning behind why they chose tobacco off the bat?
I don't know. I really don't know. That's what. As you kind of look, there's not a lot of explanation for a lot of this stuff. I'm sure there is. I don't mean to reduce that down to saying that there's not. I'm sure that there is a lot of thought. Kind of like we have a plague doctor's mask laying here, right? And when you think about that, like it all kind of sort of makes sense. For those that aren't aware of the plague doctor's mask, you can Google it. But they're super cool and super creepy. And the whole thing was they were used during the Great Plague, right, during the Black Death. And the plague doctors would go around, they'd be covered in head to toe in apron and gloves and boots. And this kind of really primitive form of PPE is kind of what it was. It was like protective equipment, right? And they would take this long beak of the mask and they would stuff it full of like stuff that smelled good, because they assumed that this bad smelling stuff that was floating in the air is actually what made you sick. It wasn't really true germ theory yet. They didn't quite understand germ theory, but they did understand. And I mean, there probably is some logic to that. I mean, you can at least put yourself there and go, okay, if I go here and it smells bad and there's like shit all over the streets and there's dead bodies, there's probably not great stuff here for me, right? But even if like the breathing of better smelling things didn't really do a lot, the mask covered their face, and like it probably actually did prevent a lot of them from getting sick, you know, to an extent. But so I use that just saying that there probably is some logic there, but I don't know. I can't wrap my head around blowing tobacco smoke up your butt. I guess I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there's probably dedicated websites for that kink now. Like if you're into like tobacco smoke, like up your butt, you can probably find it.
We'll do that later.
But then, so there was all these other kind of like cures, like medicinal cures too, which I thought was great. They love to use arsenic for whatever reason. Arsenic is not that great for you. Just saying. Like arsenic is not good, right? But one of the top remedies for anemia at the time was to use arsenic. So they would inhale the vapors, they would ingest it. It would be given back to enemas. They loved enemas back then. They would give it in enemas. And then, there you go. Arsenic straight